Adam Simmons, creator of Project Geospatial and host of the Geospatial Frontier Sensor Showdown, a series partnered by URSA. I would like to welcome you all to the Commercial Imagery to GEOINT Analytics panel. But before we get started, it is my honor to welcome back Karyn Hayes-Ryan, who will be moderating this panel for us. As many of you know, Karyn recently retired from the U.S. intelligence community as a senior executive for 17 of her 31 years. She served at the National Reconnaissance Office as Deputy of the IMINT, now GEOINT, Directorate and Deputy Chief Operating Officer, along with many key engineering positions. Karyn also served at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency as their Deputy Chief Engineer, Director of IT Oversight, and the agency's Component Acquisition Executive. Currently, she is the CEO of KHR Impacts and a board member of Project Geospatial. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Karyn Hayes-Ryan as she gets started with today's session.
Hi, today we are going to talk about the government's initial concepts for commercial imagery and how it has evolved to today's GEOINT Analytics. This includes the missions, the architectures, the requirements, and the responsibilities. Our panel is made up of some really exciting and cool people with very different backgrounds and experiences. They won't all answer all the questions, but the answers they give are going to be insightful and exciting. I also want to clarify that since these discussions have not been coordinated across the agencies, these are individuals' immediate responses and do not reflect the coordinated agency positions or any formal requirements for industry to start working towards. So I'm going to take a couple seconds to introduce each of our three panelists, and then they're going to actually talk to you about who they are before we get into the questions. So first up, I'd like to introduce Ms. Ashley Rocksmith. She's a data scientist and is currently serving as the Senior Collection Analyst for Automation and Data Modeling at NGA's Source Operations Directorate. She currently leads the integration of tools to enhance the data science tradecraft within NGA Source. Next, we have Mr. Winston Beauchamp. He is the Director of Headquarters Air Force Information Management. In this role, he serves as the Chief Information Officer and authorizing official for Headquarters Air Force. Previously, he was the Deputy Undersecretary of the Air Force for Space and the Principal DoD Space Advisor at the Pentagon. Before that, he was the Director of Mission Integration at the DNI, and he had numerous cool positions at the NGA, including my boss. And our third panelist is Inga Mironova. She is a scientist at the Army Tactical Exploitation of National Capabilities. You probably know that more as Army TENCAP. And she is also the co-chair of the National System for Geospatial Intelligence Commercial GEOINT Working Group. And that's a group that really talks about all of the user needs for commercial GEOINT. So panelists, we'll start with you, Ashley. If you could introduce yourselves with a little bit more depth.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. As Karyn said, my name is Ashley Rocksmith. I am a data scientist and I serve as the Senior Collection Analyst for Source Operations at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. In this role, I lead a team of data scientists that specialize in replicating the workflow of our customers to automate the collection of GEOINT. I ensure the delivery of data capabilities through conducting tool evaluations, and I spearhead the initiative to increase the use of automation solutions while taking into consideration current mission plans, opportunities, threats, gaps, and dependencies. This enables analysts to spend less time on data discovery, but to focus on answering the tough questions through GEOINT. And that is what keeps me going every day at work.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak here today. As Karyn mentioned, I work at the Army Tactical Exploitation of National Capabilities Office, and I'm currently leading the development and integration of several geospatial analytic capabilities, specifically focusing on automation and object detection to improve sensor-to-shooter timelines and to quickly deliver actionable intelligence to the warfighter. Additionally, I co-chair the NSG Commercial Joint Working Group. This is a forum where we inform the community on emerging commercial trends and identify any challenges or concerns associated with these capabilities of interest. We work to ensure that we can prioritize user needs accordingly, and then as a follow-on to make sure the capabilities can be integrated and have interoperability across the force. My background is actually in image science, and my graduate research focused on hyperspectral tree species identification at the University of Texas. Combining my background with hyperspectral data as well as interest in national security and just always a passion for good design and innovation, these things kind of brought me to work now at the Army Tech Cap office.
Thanks, Inga. Over to you, Winston.
Thanks, Karyn. As Karyn said, my name is Winston Beauchamp. I actually have a new position starting today as the Director of Strategic Transformation in the Office of the Chief Information Officer. And in that role, I'm responsible for the enterprise IT portfolio for the Air Force. And the GEOINT experience that I have in my background prepared me for where I am today in two ways. First, the space-based GEOINT collection work that I did at NGA and ODNI prepared me for the job that got me to the Air Force. That's the Deputy Undersecretary of the Air Force for Space position. And for my current role in IT and CIO shop, the best preparation I had was at NGA when I was the Director of Systems Engineering. That's one of the cool jobs that Karyn spoke about when I had the pleasure of working with Karyn. And so both of them, from different angles, helped to get me where I am today and prepare me for the challenges that lie ahead.
All right, thank you. So Winston, we're going to start the questions with you. Winston, you led multiple studies for commercial imagery and commercial space that became the foundation for the current architecture. What were your initial goals for the government beyond just NGA, and which ones were realized?
Sure. So the original commercial imagery strategy that we developed in 2001 proposed 3 business cases for U.S. government use of commercial. The first was unclassified imagery availability to warfighters and coalition partners. At the time, we were experiencing a lot of issues associated with getting secret or higher imagery out to international partners. There was time delays involved, and then at the pace of operations, that can be prohibitive. And so for sharing purposes, that was one of the key business cases, which after 9/11 became even more urgent because we had a lot of non-traditional partners in our did not have the framework set up for sharing of classified data. The second business case was to support the industrial base, much of which was common with the NTM business industrial base. And so that drove us in a certain direction regarding what companies we supported in order to ensure that all the suppliers and sub-suppliers were available and healthy by having 2 streams of production. And then third, mitigation. So if our partners in the NRO had a bad failure, either on launch or operationally, we knew that we would have a source of imagery available to us as a means of data collection. And those goals were met by the strategy. Another part of the strategy had to do with our funding strategy. And so lots of folks know about the commercial strategy and how it provided funding for imagery purchase. And that was true, and that money came and formed the foundation of the industry at the time. But what a lot of folks don't know is that there was also money in the strategy for geospatial production. So think of it as value-added services to produce geospatial products directly from purely commercial imagery, so that the end result would be unclassified geospatial products. And the vision there was that we would have vendors that would be able to do more than just collect imagery, but that they would provide end-to-end services. And while that is where the industry wound up, we may have been a little bit early for our time, because that money was absorbed instead into our traditional geospatial production line. Essentially, the production line was used based on NTM sources. And we never actually got, with that first set of contracts, to the point where we had the ability to do end-to-end geospatial production solely from commercial imagery source. That took another generation before we got there. But in terms of what happened and what wasn't realized out of the original strategy, we're batting 500. So.
Well, that's pretty good. Okay, so the next question. So back in 2012, Tish Long, due to the technology improvements and the startup of several new commercial collectors, raised the demand signal for GEOINT Analytics to respond to the increasing amounts of data. We weren't going to be able to put all of those analysts to look at every single image, and industry has certainly responded. Commercial data providers now have value-added products, in some cases partnering with other providers for a more robust capability, more data, more imagery, more external sources. IT companies have also created analytic tools and capabilities that bring in data from multiple sources. What does this mean for you and your colleagues? Are you integrating all of the numerous and various analytic capabilities? Are you still integrating the numerous sources of imagery and other data types? What are the challenges, I guess, and opportunities with so many analytic tools and capabilities? Ashley, can we start with you?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, NGA identified that one of the biggest challenges that we were going to face is coping with this massive amount of data that would be available to us, not just regular data, but GEOINT data within the next 5 to 10 years. And how do we keep up with that demand when we don't have what would be estimated like 8 million, I think was the number that Director Cardillo threw out, of imagery analysts to keep up with all of the GEOINT data. And since we don't have all of those imagery analysts, we are now relying on those analytic tools and capabilities to streamline our processes, not just inside the building with just dealing with GEOINT data provided by NGA, but also from our commercial providers. My team specifically has spent the last 6 months during COVID trying to analyze tools to see how they would complement and enhance our current workflow. The advantage of these tools is that they provide us the ability to replicate our processes and schedule them to run 24/7, 365 days, so that way we can focus on the data, what it tells us, versus spending all of our time doing the data discovery, which is kind of the very manual, monotonous tasks that we were actually doing. The challenge is determining which tool best fits in our toolbox, which ones will give us the best bang for our buck, which ones will provide us the ability to enhance what we're doing and keep moving our tradecraft of data modeling and automation forward, so that way we can shorten the timelines from when data is indicated to when we have collection of GEOINT, to confirmation, to feedback into that loop, to better tell that story faster and sooner and supply that data to the warfighter.
Thanks, Ashley. Inga, do you have something to add on that one?
Well, having an abundance of data is definitely unprecedented in our industry, right? And this is definitely driving us to re-examine the status quo, modernize our architecture, as well as develop our workforce to make sure that they can make appropriate use of these new capabilities. Now we have options and solutions to problems we didn't know we had. So the best thing we could do is just definitely take advantage of all these capabilities. And I think one of the most important aspects here is definitely the competitive market that it brings with all the capabilities now available to us. This drives innovation up, overall cost down, and we already see it play out, as you know. So one of the things that we do need to do is optimize how we compare and contrast various offerings, similar to what Ashley alluded to ensure we can easily identify the right capability and match it to a certain need. I definitely believe that there's plenty of government topics and issues to go around for all capabilities, or at least the top ones, right, to address. So definitely there's plenty of work to go around. But we also need to be careful not to be locked down into any proprietary solutions or formats. One of the goals we have is to be able to ingest all the different data that is available out there. It has to be interoperable. And so we highly advocate vendors make sure they're not using proprietary formats so their data can be used across multiple missions and different environments.
Okay, so let's go to the next question then. With the increased startup or the increased number of startups in the commercial space arena, commercial space companies, what do you see as the challenges and opportunities with the variety of phenomenologies new to the US from a commercial perspective in the Intel and the DoD markets? And I'm talking specifically about SAR and RF commercial GEOINT collectors, and I'm sure there are several others beyond just the original set of EO collectors. Inga, you want to start?
Well, we're very excited about the increased availability of space-based SAR, and especially availability of from US-based providers. So day or night, all-weather capability offers persistent coverage where we can't otherwise see. And combining these capabilities with, electro-optical data, RF data, and other sources, it just amplifies the value that it brings to the fight. The challenge, however, the data size is definitely a challenge. Processing the data is a challenge. Archiving, it requires additional training, and so making sure you can have a specifically trained workforce to be able to process and actually understand what the data is telling you is definitely important. So streamlining SAR processing and visualization tools are definitely necessary to break down the barriers that we see today and to actually get it out to a lot more users. And so a little bit more of a friendlier interface. Data formats are also an issue. And so we also highly advocate using standards in this case to make sure the data is interoperable and we can use it across.
Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, as Inga said, it is very exciting to have these new additional data sets available to us to incorporate into our workflow. One of the things that she mentioned that is very key is the expertise that is required with utilizing these commercial SAR and RF GEOINT collectors, making sure that we have the expertise to not only exploit it, but to also know exactly what we're getting when we place an order, whether it's pulling it from the archive or even just trying to work out the feasibility of being able to utilize this data in anticipation of getting exactly what we need out of these collectors. There is an expense associated with that is the training up the workforce to be a little bit smarter with how we utilize it, as well as trying to figure out what tools we're leveraging, different tools to try and make it easier on our workforce to leverage it, to order it, to view it, to bring it in-house. And so there is a little bit of an expense there that we're factoring into our budget plans, of course. And then understanding the variables, right? We very much so understand how we do business utilizing government sensors. So how do the variables and how we've trained our brains to do that translate to utilizing the commercially available collectors, and trying to make sure that we bring that in and using the data standards that Inga mentioned to make sure that we're able to provide that data, those collectors to our customers.
Excellent. Thank you. That is great. So next question, Ashley, we'll start with you on this one. What is your ideal state for the use of commercial GEOINT?
So my ideal state for GEOINT for commercial GEOINT is to feed it into what we're already doing. So oftentimes we use GEOINT to feed into other multi-int. We use multi-int to feed into our GEOINT. So it is used to confirm that data indicators were present to help us better tell that story of what was happening and where on the globe. And ideally, we would use GEOINT to automatically feed into other GEOINT and or multi-int processes, so that way we can get to that ideal end state, that nirvana of multi-int collection and collaboration.
Okay, so Winston, how does that compare with your initial vision when you created this commercial architecture?
I think it's very consistent. We had a series of guidance that we received from various directors of NGA, and I think starting in 2001 with Dr. Clapper, for example, he was all about integration of GEOINT and integration of the different subdisciplines of GEOINT, as well as integration with the other ints. And so I think the vision that Ashley laid out is very consistent with that. I would just add too that, while we had an inkling of this back in 2001, it's become very clear now that commercial GEOINT doesn't stand alone. As Ashley pointed out, we need to integrate it into the way we do business, because there's certainly some ability for it to take over a big chunk of the mission, especially if there were losses. And so the third tenet of our strategy was in gap mitigation. And today, that's a fancy way of saying resilience, because we know that space is a contested domain. We know that adversaries have figured out just how much the United States depends upon space-based capabilities and how much of a force multiplier it is. And so we are aware of the fact that our space-based systems are targeted, and that we, in order to both deter attacks as well as to respond if there were losses, we rely upon commercial capabilities to fill some of that gap. And if our adversaries know that, gosh, if you take out one system, there's 10 more right behind it, maybe that becomes less of a targeting priority. And so when you include that into the strategy, it makes it even more important to do what Ashley said and integrate commercial capabilities as fully as possible into our workflow.
Cool. All right. So I want to go into I'll call it a lightning round, where I just want short answers or sound bites from you guys. And it's okay if you don't want to weigh in on a particular question, but it'd be great if we could get the various perspectives for as many as possible on all of that. So high cadence, high resolution, sensor spectral diversity. Which two, or all three needed? Inga, we'll start with you.
So we don't expect any single solution to address all the challenges that we have. And striving for a well-balanced competitive market is the key to further accelerating these capabilities and expanding the overall U.S. space economy. So we need to be able to federate across a diverse set of capabilities and meet all the different requirements between the spatial, temporal resolution, and make sure we're be able to leverage all the different modalities that are available.
Okay, Ashley?
High cadence. We are constantly trying to satisfy the needs of the GEOINT community, and we are bombarded with the number of requirements that we have. And so if we can get to a higher cadence, a higher revisit rate, we would be super happy to be able to fill in some of those gaps that we have right now.
Okay, Winston?
One of the regrets on the original strategy, something we didn't get to, was the development of a better metric quality. We talk about NIRS as the metric we use to judge the ability of imagery to answer a need. But our goal was always to develop a better metric that took into account all three dimensions of quality. spatial, spectral, and temporal. Knowing that different points of that spiderweb chart, different requirements could be satisfied with perhaps different levels of each. And we know that high revisit gives you aspects of patterns of life that you don't get simply by one high resolution image. And similarly, we know that spectral capabilities can tell you some things that you can't see no matter how many times you take a black and white picture. And so I'm going to demur a little bit by saying yes for different sets of requirements.
Okay. Mostly Ashley, but probably all of you. In which areas do you believe industry should focus their innovation resources to better serve the mission?
Data is three areas: data standards, integration of tools, and integration of data. We have to move away from stovepipes. It is critical that we be able to pull data from multiple sources to get to the end, to get a better picture of what's happening. And then as well as the integration of tools, so that way the tools can talk to each other. If we handicap ourselves by being only one tool and it doesn't talk to the other one, then we have handicapped ourselves. So it is very important that we have a full integration across the board.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Sure, I would. So to add to Ashley's point, I definitely support data standards and standardization across the variety of analytics that are coming on board. But with my background in hyperspectral, I definitely see that this is a very rich data set that is underutilized in so many ways. And I would encourage the industry to take a look and seeing if we can have more capabilities or a capability available to us commercially. I think that would be definitely of interest. Another point I'd like to make is to encourage different vendors to collaborate and work on figuring out ways to how they can collaborate and preserve their IP to deliver a hybrid capability and hybrid products. Because again, it's not practical for us to be accessing so many different capabilities. We want to leverage maybe all of them, right? And we cannot go to all the different platforms that are available out there to leverage them, because a lot of them are complementary or they support each other in different ways. And so I definitely encourage a lot more development in that space.
Anyone else?
Well, I would just like to say that the more things change, the more they stay the same. On the standards question, in the beginning, it was the Wild West, and we used to say, the nice thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. But the hope was always that what would happen over time is that it would coalesce around a series of data standards that then you could still have multiple tools that would be focused on doing different missions, but they at least would be operating on data of the same format so that you could then do something to it, transform it in some way, and make it available and shareable to other people who happen to use other tools. Still have some work to go there, but it's certainly better than it was back in the day.
With the establishment of Space Force, should we expect new or different requirements for the commercial GEOINT environment?
So with the Space Force stand-up, the relationship between the Air Force, Department of the Air Force and Space Force underneath it, and DoD in general, with the intelligence community hasn't changed. So that's an area that still needs to be addressed and resolved. But there is certainly room for lots of cooperation. And when I was in the job, we certainly did a lot of collaboration with friends at the NRO and with NGA. And what we found, if I were to say what the trends pointed to, were, every sensor that was designed for Earth-based sensing, space to Earth, could also be used for surveillance purposes in space, meaning you have to protect yourself, right? And is there some way that you could design your system so that you could either look for threats in your immediate environs, or to help protect other friendly systems in your area. And so the analogy here is we thought that that might change the way we design our systems. Harkening back to the comment earlier about, well, gosh, we wanted to build up the industrial base because it could support NTM. We're now in a world where those have diverged quite a bit. There's some foundations that are fundamental, spacecraft design, launch, for example, but the camera design, for example, is extremely diverse. And it's kind of like saying, what relationship does your cell phone camera, was your iPhone 11, have to the wall phone that used to hang on the wall in your kitchen? Almost none, right? Except for the fact that it happens to transmit and receive sound. And so in the same way that when you open up the standards, when you open up the potential, the possibilities, you get a lot of diversity in design. I think the same is going to be true in space, and Space Force is going to, by design, attempt to leverage as much of that as possible. They certainly have been very aggressive in reaching out to industry to look at ways that they can work together. Their focus areas so far have been in communications, position navigation, and timing, but I expect that given the fact that one of their main charges is defending our architecture in space, that they'll be reaching out to the geospatial world as well.
Cool. Anybody else want to comment on that one? All right. With your work hats on, all three of you, what are your top 3 priorities? Ashley, you can start.
Sure. The number 1 priority is reducing the latency between discovery of data indicators to using GEOINT to collect. The second priority would be increase in data standardization to make the data work faster and harder for us versus spending time conditioning data for use. And the third would be better GEOINT analysis tools to transform pixels into standardized data to feed into GEOINT processes for either collection or to feed into other workflows or processes for our customers. So ultimately, bettering ourselves so that way the data, GEOINT data, works better for us and faster, so that way we can get to answering some of those tougher questions that our analysts are trying to work to answer.
Cool. Inga?
Yes, so the number 1 priority is developing the Titan pre-prototype ground station for the Army. Alongside with that is priority to address assured and responsive tasking that will help drive the collection for the prototype as well. And the third priority I will mention is also piloting the NSG-wide NSG-wide evaluation process to assess the various emerging capabilities. This will give community equal access to data samples to actually be able to bring the data into their environment, test it, provide feedback, and that will actually help speed the acquisition process as well by helping basically the community figure out which priorities lie with higher need. So.
Okay, Winston, I know you have a brand new job that we didn't really factor in, but you can answer in that job or your current position or your old position.
Sure. So I'll say it in this way, and this applies also to the airmen in the Air Force who work in the geospatial career field as well. But my job, what I want to do for them, is largely consists of the following 3 things. 1, moving applications to the cloud so that they can be available to everyone at the enterprise level. Number 2, connecting those airmen at network speed so that they can take advantage of the systems that are put there and data that are put there by everybody else. And 3, as a result, freeing up airmen from O&M duties to be able to put them on the task to defend the network. And all of that helps to enable the infrastructure that's needed to do a number of missions within the Air Force, to include geospatial intelligence, as well as flying, fighting, and winning.
Excellent. Hey, Winston, I think I forgot to ask you a question. I was just going through my cards here and I must have dropped one off. So your architecture and study work on commercial imagery culminated in 2009 with the establishment of the joint DoD and IC funding of the program Enhanced View. That program is still in place today. So shortly after that award, and I'm very familiar with that because I ran that program, you were selected for a position at ODNI. And while that was a great career move and it led you to all your exciting Air Force positions, was there ever anything that you felt you left unfinished?
Sure. So there were two areas. The first was the one I spoke to earlier about the lack of a three-dimensional NIRS metric that would balance between spatial, spectral, and temporal. The other one, though, was that we always wanted to put an escalation clause into the license that would allow the maximum resolution permissible under the license to continue to increase as competition in the world advanced. We never got there. As a result, we wound up having to do another major study every time we wanted to increase the resolution limits on the licenses, one of which I ran while I was at the ODNI working for Director Clapper, and the other one we went through when I was back in the Air Force and was on the receiving end. And so every time we did an exercise like that, we had to go through coordination steps with all of the relevant agencies. There's about 24 of them, and fend off the familiar attacks from folks saying it's going to kill us from a tradecraft perspective. What we found is that both times we went through that exercise, we wound up with a more competitive position in industry, but no appreciable change in our force protection posture because the whole rest of the world adjusted to the situation at hand. And they were also aware of the fact that we were well in excess of those limits on the government side anyway. And so I don't think there was nearly the impact that some thought there might be of changing those limits. So if I were to do it again, I would have fought more to put the escalation clause into the contract up front. But at the end, we wound up getting there. And so overall, those are the two biggest regrets, but they're structural in nature. I still hope we can get the NIRS metric built that would allow us to measure every requirement, but that might be just wishful thinking. We'll see.
Okay, so I believe that is it for the formal questions. We have a lot of questions that have been coming in from our live audience. So we're gonna go through those. Some of these questions may be for one of you or for all of you. Please let me know if you want to take a stab at answering it. Otherwise, I'll just assign it to somebody and then the others can jump in. This one's obviously going to be for Inga because it's, does industry participate in the CGWG? And if not, can they?
Thank you. So technically the industry does not participate. It is for the NSG community members, but we do invite industry to brief their capabilities to the community and to the working group. So if you're interested, you're welcome to send me a message and we can discuss further.
An interesting question. Do we still need national collectors?
I think we do. A lesson I keep teaching my son is there is power in ownership. And so by us having control over our own collectors directly, I think there is a benefit with you have priority. You design it to your own specifications. You have the ultimate control of how and who uses it. And then you can modify along the way as your needs change. So I absolutely believe that we do need them.
Okay, anyone else want to comment?
I will second Ashley's answer.
I will just say that, yes, I think we do. I don't think we need them to do what we may have originally envisioned them to do. So the role that they have are going to continue to evolve and change over time. And instead of just evolving with the state of technology, they'll evolve with the environment.
Okay. There appears to be a rising DoD demand for direct downlink of unclassified imagery, as indicated by NRO's 2019 RFI and the emerging TAC GEO program. What role does commercial GEOINT analytics have to play in direct support of the tactical warfighter? Does on-orbit analytics on the collection platform have a real role to play?
They play a huge role, and that's one of the priorities that we're working on right now, is integrating and developing these different analytics that are available into the prototype that we're working. And anytime we do not have to downlink actual pixels, does streamline the process. If we're able to process these on board or any alternative ways, I think at the end of the day, what our priority is to have the actual actionable intel that we can pass on to the warfighter. So this does not have to be pixels. It could be actual final process, products or locations.
Anyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. The NGA is a warfighting support agency. So obviously we want to make sure that we can streamline that process to get one of our main customers the data that they need in the time frame that they need it. So if that is the best way to do it, yes, I think Winston hinted at something earlier, which is we have to be able to adjust to the environment. And if that is where our customers are moving, then we need to move with them as well.
Okay. What emerging sensors or technology has surprised you the most? What gave you some light bulb moments or, whoa, I didn't know that was even possible?
Well, I guess I'll jump in. The part that I didn't expect to advance as fast as it has is space-based infrared. And so understanding that it was a less mature technology when it was deployed, as with all the technologies that we've deployed, they've gone up and then they've been tuned and tweaked over time. And space-based infrared was less mature when it was launched, and so the amount of adjustment that has been able to be done in terms of improving spatial, spectral, and temporal aspects of its use has advanced very, very rapidly. But similar to probably how the other technologies did in the early days of their deployment, but rapidly compared to how they're moving now. And I've been pretty impressed with their application to warfighting capabilities.
Thanks. Anyone else?
For me, it was actually the obvious of GEOINT as a whole. But aside from being exposed to GEOINT, it would be the use of automating workflows and tying it into direct tasking, moving away from manual processes and allowing what would be hours or days worth of work to happen within minutes to then get information to our customers while they're sleeping, getting the data to work for them, so that way when they come into work, they're able to do their actual analysis and not starting at the beginning with data discovery.
Okay. Who makes the best GEOINT analytic tools? IT companies, data providers, or some combination thereof? And you don't have to give a specific name because we're not trying to do any kind of bold advertising.
I think it's a combination of the two, because I think our tools are evolving to our data, and our data is helping us push to evolve our tools. It is very cyclical at least within the data science realm. And that's exactly what we need to be able to push our tradecraft forward. But yeah, I definitely think that it is both driving each other to be better.
I definitely agree with that statement, and that it's a hybrid approach again of having both resources there.
Okay. This one's for Inga. Does the CGWG define the requirements for commercial imagery collection and for GEOINT Analytics?
Yeah, so we define the requirements, and we also would like to highlight that we don't believe that there are any specifically commercial requirements out there. What there are just requirements and needs that the community has, and commercial addresses those. So we always want to make sure we highlight that. And now, so what we do is we do identify requirements that can potentially be addressed by commercial capabilities. And that's one of the goals, is for us to prioritize what those are, and then work with the community to make sure that they have been able to assess them, provide feedback on them, and then provide their own ranking of them. Sure. So that way, when we have input from multiple members, the community can make as a whole the decision, what are the best things to go after to integrate to bring most value to the entire community and DoD.
Cool. Thank you, Inga. So another question, probably for all of you. There are a few different fora going on over the next few days that present new technologies to the government. One example is AFWERX Engage Space. I'm sure this is related to some of the CIBR programs and some other things that we've seen out there. How does your organization watch events like that to assess emerging technologies? Are there certain topics that pique more interest than others right now?
I can just address the AFWERX part of it. The area that everyone is looking at are applications for artificial intelligence. And because of the fact that they're so broad ranging, because they're advancing so quickly, and because the demand is there, given our requirement to find savings in personnel, there's a lot of interest in this area and a lot of potential investment, whether it's RPA type business analytics solutions that will reduce manpower on the business side, or actually in mission as well. We're looking a lot, looking very strongly at some of the in artificial intelligence.
Anyone else?
So I can comment on that. So within my immediate team and organization, I think one of the approaches we have is divide and conquer. There's a lot going on in this space. And I think we definitely try to, always have somebody present from the team, and then share that information. As this information becomes available, I think we've made it a goal, at least, also to bring these new capabilities and identify kind of the priority ones of most interest to community, and then have the specific speakers brief to the kind of a larger body and working group, where then you could further share that information as well.
I would definitely echo what Inga said. We definitely divide and conquer conferences, tradecraft shows, GEOINT symposium, and then we bring back what sparked any interest within these engagements, so that way we can assess as a team, how can that fit into what we're already doing, and how can it enhance what we're doing to make what we're doing faster and better.
Good, thank you. All right. Question specifically said for Ashley. What role does structured observation management in NGA's adoption of commercial GEOINT analytics? So I guess it's what role does SOM play in NGA's adoption of commercial GEOINT analytics?
Absolutely. So part of what we're trying to do with SOM is be faster with recognition of and input into those databases, so that way we can feed it into other processes. So that way that data becomes more readily available to other parts of the NSG and ASG for that matter. So SOM is very, very important to that for us, because that is the way that we have adopted formalizing and standardizing some of that data to be easier to use for our customers.
Thanks, Ashley. This question is asked for Winston. Integration into current workflows seems conflicting with the amount of data we have and the need to process it into answers. How do you resolve it to change how the entire mission does business around new workflows or integrating those into the current norm?
So that's a big question, and I don't think it relies upon any one discipline that would be attacking that problem. Generally, where we've had success is when we've brought together cross-functional groups to look at different parts of the problem. Efforts that have relied upon only one functional area to solve it all have generally failed, or taken a lot longer than they would otherwise. And so, without trying to answer the question here, I would give you a way to solve it, which would be make sure you bring in the folks with a wide variety of. You certainly want the technologists in the room. You want the mission guys in the room, the people who do the analytics themselves. You want good data people as well, because if you're not careful, you're going to wind up with data holdings and output formats that are unmanageable and not scalable for the future. And you want a customer there as well to be able to say, this either does or does not answer my question, or it's not, is or is not easy to use. And none of this is outside the realm of the possible. This is not generally a technology problem as you've posed it. The challenges appear to mostly be cultural. And if we can find a way to listen to each other and take advantage of the skills and experiences that we all bring to the table from different disciplines, and are willing to let go to the preconceptions that hold us back into single discipline and analytics, then I think you have a really good chance of success in being able to achieve your goals.
Good. All right. Interesting question here. What efforts are underway to maximize the utility of the new RF geolocation systems, such as Unseen Labs, Horizon Technologies, Cleos, and Hawkeye 360? He is especially interested in the use cases for maritime domain and pairing with AIS.
I can take a stab at that question. One of the tools that we are piloting right now, and we're doing a demonstration, is pulling in the Hawkeye 360 data that we can then pair in with other data sets to make better use of it, to then feed our processes inside the building. So we have a team outside the building supporting COVID activities, and then a team inside the building. So we're trying to leverage that data to bring it into serve as one of the data sets to help us build out a better, more complete picture by bringing in additional data sets. Maritime is definitely something that we are concerned with, and one of our use cases that we are leveraging to pilot how Hawkeye 360 with our data analytics capability can feed into our normal day-to-day processes.
Great, thank you, Ashley. All right. Getting the NEAR structure to a commercial standard sounds like an amazing concept. How would you recommend that get started?
Okay, so I'll take a crack at it. the way we had planned to address this problem was the same way that we defined quality requirements for using the near scale today. And that is, we said, what does it take to be able to answer this question? What are the essential elements of information you need to answer? But to expand the answer into multiple dimensions. Yes, I could answer this question with really high nearest shot. I could answer it with a more modest resolution at a certain periodicity, or I could answer it with a series of spectral images. And for different missions, for different questions that were asked, we would essentially be placing dots on a spiderweb chart to describe what the different levels of quality required to answer the question. And over time, as you build up this data set of solutions, what you wind up doing as you look at an entire mission area is you're deriving requirements for future collection systems. You're backing into a series of certainly more flexible requirements that would allow you to say, there might be more than one way to answer this question. And depending upon what I have available to me at this part of the world at this time, I could answer the question in different ways. So it is a significant undertaking, absolutely, because you're no longer just answering in one dimension, you're answering in three. And you probably have to provide half a dozen data points for each requirement instead of one. But if we did a pilot that looked at one mission space and generated a set of requirements in that way, I think you definitely would be able to assess the utility of it and determine if it's something you want to continue to do and invest the work to go forward from there.
Thanks, Winston. Hey, we are out of time to answer questions. Adam, I'd really like to thank you for the opportunity to interview this great group of folks. Panelists, your organizations identified you as the best and the brightest. So we certainly look forward to seeing what's next for you. We obviously know what's next for Winston, but it'd be really cool. We'd love to have you back, do some follow-ups as things progress in this area. Any last words, thoughts from the panelists?
Well, thank you very much for having me here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you both. Appreciate the opportunity.